So a very brief introduction. Most of you, I'm sure, will have heard me this morning. So I run the marketing and PR department for essentially the in-house indie at Universal Pictures. So a very different slate of content, my films. So we release typically around 80 titles a year, and across every genre really. So independent film, documentary, which is one of our kind of strategic wheelhouse genre. We do kids animation, we do live events. Barbie, by the way, pays my wages, just so you guys all know. We do lots of live events, so we send our own cameras in to West End theatres and create films and beam them into cinemas. So we're a distinct group within Universal Pictures. And I guess one of the reasons why I'm obsessed with this question is obviously we don't have studio-type budgets. And so connecting the right people with our content is something that I'm obsessed with. Essentially, I think about this every day, and I've really enjoyed making a PowerPoint document out of it. Actually has been really cathartic for me, so thank you, CMO Inspired, for allowing me to do that. I'm going to confess right now, I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know. You guys know all of this stuff already. What I'm going to try and do, because we're all a bunch of seasoned marketing professionals, we're experts apparently, I'm just going to share with you some real examples of how we are trying to do this, and hopefully it will be interesting and help you reflect on how you guys are doing it. But like I say, there's no kind of rocket science here, or I haven't suddenly discovered the holy grail of marketing that nobody else has discovered. Just indulge me for a minute. Again, you guys know this, but this is the context, I guess, that I'm working within. So we all know that content is still king. And for all of you guys who aren't within a content organisation, I can imagine that over the last year or two in particular, you've all been thinking about how you can use content in your marketing, how you can create your own content. We've all seen what the likes of Vice and Red Bull have done to become content producers, content owners. Vice now make more money out of selling content than they do out of selling ad space, which is something that I'm surprised to learn about. So we all know that content is still king, and it is everywhere. It's everywhere. I mean, I know I'm adding to the problem every day by obviously releasing more content, but if you have an iPhone, you can cut a film. We're all producers. So I'll have a stat, because apparently sharing stats is the dumb thing at these things. Over 819 million videos on YouTube alone, which is a stat from earlier this year, so I can only imagine that that's nearly hitting 1 billion at this point. And then for my world, you add to that iTunes, Netflix, every kind of boutique SVOD offering you can name, every DVD that you can buy in a shop, every cinema that's playing in any theatre around the world, your friend's daily snap, all the things that you're getting on Facebook that they're deciding you should see. That is way too much content for any of us to actually meaningfully engage with. Of course, a ridiculous amount of content. And not only do we not want to engage in it all, obviously, because it's not all for us, we don't have the time, and sifting through to try and discover the things that interest us is the challenge, I guess. How can we serve you up with stuff? How can we influence Facebook to serve you up with stuff that is relevant, that will actually get you to choose to watch an entire film? Give up an hour and a half of your day to watch an entire film. I love this picture. So this picture ran, I think, in the Telegraph about a year ago, when the news broke that we now have an attention span that is less than a goldfish. So goldfish attention span, 9 seconds. We're now officially on 8. And that is a direct result of smartphone usership. So I talked about the 6-second ad this morning, which is a new format that YouTube have introduced. And the fact that we're always on, we're also always off doing something else. And so actually engaging people is the real challenge. And it's the thing, as I say, that I am obsessed with and that I'm wrestling with every single day. And I'm sure that you guys are as well. So for me, within my context, time poor, I'm cash poor. I have a lot of content to get out to, big niches, small niches, mainstream audiences. How can I do that in the most effective way so they choose to buy money, spend their own hard-earned cash on my content as opposed to somebody else's content? And I phrase the question in this way because as I said earlier, what we do as marketers is still the same. Find the right consumer, serve them the right thing at the right time, and you will create the action that is what you're looking to create. So that challenge is absolutely still the right challenge. Thanks. So again, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. There are a few easy routes that one can take to help your stuff surface above all of the other stuff that's out there. And one way is to throw money at it. Obviously, the Hollywood system is about throwing money at it, because you guys know marketing budgets for the launch of a major tentpole runs into the hundreds of millions, often outweighs the production budget, which in itself is typically $200 to $300 million. Around the world, by the time they've marketed the next Fast and Furious, we will have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on doing that. And I don't have that option. So I can't do that. And I wanted to share that as a challenge, because again, just spending your way through it really isn't the option, and I can't blitz you with my advertising in the way that the big studio can. Now, what I can do is I can throw a party, and you can all throw parties too. I wanted to put this on here because for us it's such a powerful tactic really now, and so the idea of eventification and just creating an anchor activity that allows you to, frankly, just hook a campaign onto something that is happening that feels relevant and feels like it has scale and importance. This is actually a very affordable thing to do, and genuinely, from an ROI perspective, in terms of the awareness that it generates, for us, is a really, really effective tool. So this is Leicester Square last November the 9th, where we launched Cristiano Ronaldo's film that we had produced. We wanted to make a film about a footballer. Messi seemed a bit boring, had to be Ronaldo. Luckily he agreed, and we presented him with the Guinness Book of World Records. He broke his own record, I think, within 3 minutes of setting it, whatever it was. We thought he deserved something for that. And we went into Leicester Square that night actually not having sold very many tickets beforehand, because pre-selling cinema tickets is a big deal, as I'm sure you guys, if you buy cinema tickets, will know. And people just came, and it was the most amazing thing. And the kind of coverage that we got off the back of this. Now, clearly, this dude is famous. He is genuinely as famous as Angelina Jolie. So this was always going to do really, really great business for us from a commercial perspective. But it just overperforms time and time again. And we've done much smaller versions, actually, more recently. We had a documentary about the rise and fall of Tower Records earlier this year, directed by Tom Hanks' son, Colin Hanks, who really nobody knows. And we took him to the House of Vans, and we had a special screening with some invited people. He did a Q&A, and that too was phenomenal. And honestly, it didn't even hit 5 figures in terms of what it actually cost us. So you can be very, very smart in terms of how you actually apply your marketing budget, and you can create a groundswell of awareness, which obviously every campaign needs. Cute picture. Justification in and of itself. But the idea that I touched on this morning of, somebody asked a question about personalization, the lovely lady from Cedar. Thanks for coming. And I talked about the idea of actually allowing people to own a piece of the film, or at least to make consumers genuinely feel like they are part of the crew. And I'm going to show you a video of a crazy person in a second, who has done just that. So this is a really niche, slightly stoner comedy called Iron Sky. Has anyone even heard of this film? I don't expect you to, by the way. None of you are in the target demographic, so it's okay. I can tell that just by looking at you. It is a film that essentially put Nazis on the moon and created a whole kind of alternate reality for the future of the world, where the Nazis had survived on the moon and were kind of coming back to do away with us all. And obviously it's ridiculous and hilarious. Did its biggest business in Germany. The Germans absolutely loved the film because it allowed them to actually laugh at themselves and about this thing that had been such obviously a dark part of their history, and is a really genuinely funny film. And we are releasing the second part of that next year. And what's really interesting about this is, first of all, that fans have helped to fund the film. Fans have been extras within the film. People have paid really good money to be the person that gets eaten by the dinosaur in the film, like really good money. And I'm going to show you this video because it just, for me, has been such a lovely experience of working with the filmmakers who are genuinely connected to their fan base and have been what the studio never is, because we're all about protection and control. They've actually just put themselves out there and invited everybody to come in and have a film to show for it at the back. So here's the crazy guy.
Have you got any idea how long it's going to take for a normal person to get to see Iron Sky: The Coming Race? It's not going to happen this summer. It is definitely not going to happen this winter. Tero, do you believe it's going to happen next year?
I don't tell anybody that there's a screening coming. Come on, Timo, please.
Okay, I will not. But I have to say this, that the film is not going to be in screening anytime soon. Not for a normal person. But you're not a normal person, right, Otto?
No.
We're not talking to the normal people here. We're talking to the Iron Sky fans. And to the Iron Sky fans, you have a chance to see Iron Sky: The Coming Race, not in 15 months, not in 12 months time, not in 6 months time, but actually in 1 month time. Either in Berlin or Helsinki, we are organizing a pre-screening of Iron Sky: The Coming Race, and we are inviting every one of you to join on board to see the film in its current state, which means that it's an early edit version of the film. We don't have a lot of anything in it, but the structure is there, the film is there, and now we're gonna make the hard decision. What's gonna happen next? How are we gonna edit this? Which is working, which isn't working? What is good, what is not? And we want to have your opinion on that way before anybody else has to say anything about it. We want to make changes now when...
You get the point. That's an amazing thing. These people saw the film before I did, and I have funded the film, and I'm going to be distributing the film. And honestly, it's actually been a revolution for me, because not only have they funded the film through doing this, but they have become so powerful within their fan base, and they've created a marketing platform for me that is already there and is fantastic and incredibly engaged and incredibly dedicated. And these guys are going to be ambassadors for the rest of the world and are going to help me do my job. And that is an amazing thing, and definitely something to bear in mind, because the connectivity we have to consumers is so good now that this is a real thing, and it can happen, and it can live and breathe. And this is happening more and more in kind of independent movie making, and is fantastic. Obviously, you have to get the targeting right. So that's a fire hydrant and not a minion. And you guys obviously know this as well as I do, and it's one of the reasons why I genuinely do embrace digital media, because of how targeted it can be. And if you're not working with 4-quadrant movies that are going to be appropriate for the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old, if your content is actually much more niche than that, or even slightly more niche than that, you need to be able to target really cleverly and effectively. And what digital offers us the ability to do is just that. So you can get so granular on Facebook, as I'm sure you guys know. You can add in so many variables to how you're defining your audience, and you can speak very singularly to the right person. And hopefully create, obviously, the kind of the content exchange that you want to make. So for me, this is fundamental, and for my business, digital has been revolutionary, and I love it, even though it's taken lots of other businesses a little bit by surprise. So I'm going to show another clip, which again is just a perfect example of targeting. This is not one of mine. This is Deadpool. Everybody who's in the film industry is talking about not the film, but the way the film has been marketed, because it's just so good. It's so good. It's clever, it's funny, it is absolutely on brand for the film itself. They must have paid Ryan Reynolds an absolute fortune because he has personally marketed the film in everywhere that you've seen the film, there is an element of Ryan Reynolds in character in it. And that genuinely, does not happen very often. When it happens, it is as powerful as this has been. So this is the Blu-ray ad, which would typically show you a very, very cut kind of rundown version of the trailer, and then would end with a pack shot. That's how DVD and Blu-ray ads have always worked. And this is the Blu-ray ad for Deadpool.
You're closer now than ever. Deadpool on Blu-ray helps you be ready anytime. Ask your doctor if your heart is healthy enough for Deadpool on Blu-ray. If you experience joint pain, easy bruising, vomiting, or clay-colored stool, stop watching Deadpool immediately. If you experience hair loss, skin sores, and irritability, you may actually be Deadpool. And if you experience an erection lasting longer than 4 hours, you're welcome. On Blu-ray and DVD.
Just so good. And, has definitely made lots of people think again about, or think differently about how they're going to do this advertising in the future, me included. Now, obviously, you have to get your media right too. Who doesn't think this is genius? This is genius. It's just so good. It's perfect in every single way from a marketing perspective, I believe. And obviously, it's just so good. I can't actually stop looking at it. Now, clearly, the media mix, we all know this, and it's, again, just reinforcing what I said earlier. None of the basic rules of marketing, 4 Ps, they've become the 4 Cs, whatever, they're exactly the same thing. You have to get, all of that stuff that we all know has to be right, and including the media mix. And this, for me, is the best example that I've been able to find of the right media. All you can eat, there's a rest stop through the tunnel, and you pass through it's just fantastic. One of my panel colleagues earlier this morning said the words "make an emotional connection," and it is fundamentally true that without that, people won't engage in content. And this is a very small film about a very big subject. So this is a film called We Are Many, which is about the global marches, the global anti-war marches that took place back in 2013 around the world, ahead of obviously going in to bomb Iraq. And we redesigned the sleeve, and this was the design that we kind of came up with. And this sits on iTunes, and if you scroll through the documentary page in the film page on iTunes, this stands out. And I guess if you are this way inclined, everybody that talks about this piece of artwork is definitely someone who actually cares about the subject. And this is one image that has somehow captured, a universal truth about taking a stand against the war. And it's really difficult, when you're developing key art, to have one image that represents an entire film and is really, really powerful. And we did it in this case, and I'm going to show you the trailer in a second because I think that does the same. And, making an emotional connection, obviously, making people laugh is great. Making people feel, lovely and romantic is great. Making people feel rage is actually really powerful too. And there's nothing else that you can do with a subject like this apart from genuinely, rely on people to, if they are inclined. And obviously, lots of viewpoints on this subject, and we're not about really changing the viewpoint at all. We are just about making sure that the film hits the right people who have the right mindset that is in line with the film. And so being very, very singular in our communication to them and tapping into the rage that exists within this particular subject matter.
Not in our names, not in our names.
The institutions of the British state had set out to tell lies.
It's the biggest demonstration of coordinated history of the whole Earth.
It was off the hook. Something began on that day that cannot be reversed.
A mass, beautiful movement that's gonna stop them from dropping those bombs.
We had something like 60% of the American people believing that Saddam Hussein was connected with 9/11.
They blatantly lied to all of us.
The rallies of February 15th followed the sun.
It was Australia, it was Sydney.
North Asia and South Asia, Africa, into Europe.
And then we had London.
I thought I was on the wrong march because there were all these families.
Virtually everybody I know was on it.
The whole of my family went on it.
It was so beautiful.
This was the future of humanity.
They can't hold us back! Bush, you can't hold us back!
My fellow Americans, let's roll.
This bastard is actually going to take us to war.
The American people do not want this!
It was over.
Back up! Back up!
Our victory, not theirs.
War criminal! War criminal! Arrest this man!
These were lies.
They can take their medals back.
That's when hell broke loose in Egypt.
If you keep coming back, at some point you will make the change.
So again, you know, from the perspective of targeting, that debate is happening online. That is where people around the world are connecting with other people who believe, you know, that this was the wrong thing to do. And so for us, cutting a great piece of creative that taps into that and absolutely does justice to it, and then finding those people, it has been, you know, a really fantastic thing. This would have been a really, really difficult film to market in a world where digital media didn't exist. You know, you would have been limited to an ad in The Guardian, and you would have hoped that that would have had, you know, the kind of impact that actually digital media is having, and I don't think it would have done. So the final thing to say, because this is my favourite piece of, one of my favourite pieces of creative, is just to make it good. We talked about that this morning. You can't have all of your ducks in a row and serve a shitty piece of creative and expect that to be okay. You know, there's that fantastic example of Domino's Pizza, I think, who put out a poll on their social media saying, don't you think our pizzas are great? And actually most people said no. And that's on their, it's on their page, and they've created that for themselves. They just didn't think that through, and they didn't think through what the consequences of that were going to be. And then they had to scramble to try and figure it out. So, you know, fundamentally, good marketing is good marketing. And if you are engaged with something that you see because it connects with you as an individual, then that's good marketing. And yes, you know, we've bought the right media to make sure that you kind of saw it. But fundamentally, if we haven't served you something that actually piques your interest and makes you want to find out more, then we've essentially failed in doing our job. So basically, you have to serve people with something that is good. Hopefully great. I mean, great is hard to do. 80 titles a year, it's hard to make 80 titles a year great. So of course, you try and back the winners, and if, you know, for those of you who are in entertainment, it's impossible to back the winners. At a level, even at that tentpole level, Superman versus Batman, Batman versus Superman, whatever it was called, pretty much everybody decided that was not a great film. It made, it made nearly $1 billion. So you do need to weigh those things up. But the fact that the perception is that it was a really, really bad film will absolutely impact what happens to that franchise in the future. And so you can't just serve people with crappy stuff. You have to actually serve them with good stuff. And that's content and marketing. So the final piece that I'm going to show is an ad that premiered last week, I think, for us on Good Morning Britain, and I think is really good creative. Don't tell me it's not, because I'll be really, really upset. It's not for all of you. It's been an interesting challenge, this one, which is why I wanted to share it, because it's for an animated film for grown-ups, which already is like a little bit of a weird thing. And it is, you know, really the story of two people who have been married for a very, very long time and have seen Britain change, and all of the major changes from the Blitz through to the introduction of the things that most people can't really relate to anymore. Again, another challenge. It's actually based on a graphic novel by Raymond Briggs, who wrote The Snowman, so is known for kids stuff, and it's the story of his parents' lives. And it's a true story, and it is so poignant and so lovely. And we've been talking about this film for quite a long time, and you know, at the beginning you kind of see World War, you see any World War content in anything, and really the obvious kind of thing to do is to base it around Remembrance Day and tap into that nostalgia. And actually, one of the people in my team delivered a great piece of genius thinking where she kind of said, it's just the story of two people who love each other, who have seen the world change in a really, really, you know, dramatic way. And actually, I got goosebumps when she said that. And the idea of that, which I think we've captured pretty well, really well, actually, because I nearly cried when I watched that, and I don't cry, just for the record. I just think it's such a great piece of intuitive marketing that is about, you know, tapping into an emotional connection, and hopefully will allow us to broaden the positioning of the film outside of OAPs and kind of World War enthusiasts. We love them as a niche, but we genuinely think that the film should be broader than that. And I think and I hope that what we've done is achieved.
Am I to understand that you wish to get married to a man?
Yes, madam.
Let's see a kiss for the bride. Hold it there, big smiles.
Lots of rooms for two people.
Perhaps there'll be more than two one day.
This was their finest hour.
Blimey, Doug, this is it.
I've been to the doctor.
You mean we're going to...
Yippee!
Right a bit, Ed. Don't want the nappies in the picture.
You do look smart.
More tea, Ed.
Look at you. Here's a comb.
Bye, Mum. Bye, Dad.
Cheerio, son.
I could have married a deep-sea diver.
Well, why didn't you?
Because I didn't love him.
Put the kettle on, shall I, Duck? Nice cup of tea.
I love that, and I think it is the best shot we've got of actually broadening the positioning of the film. So we'll see. We'll talk about it next year when we know what the results are. It doesn't launch until later this year. But again, for me, it's a great representative of what I think is really, really good creative. So final slide, and this is, I mean, lucky strike for anyone who kind of, you know, studied marketing in the Kotler world, which is because I'm old and have done this job for a very long time. Lucky strike is one of those very, very early examples of marketing that we all talk about. And that is still a killer piece of creative. Everything that's going, I mean, it's so nuanced and fantastic and brilliant on so many levels. And, you know, if you actually had the time for people to read that stuff, that would be a great way to market still today. And then this is the Coke example that I mentioned earlier, which I just love, because the idea of having your own name on a bottle of Coke, what a dream. And do you guys know how this idea, it originated in Australia? Did you guys hear this story? Fantastic. Nobody knew it was happening. Overnight, traditional bottles of Coke were taken off shelves and were replaced by, you know, the topmost names in Australia. And the viral effect of that the next day was so powerful that it became a global thing, quite rightly, because it's just such a brilliant thing to offer people. And it's just great marketing. And really, that was the only thing that I kind of wanted to say and share and say again and again and again. It all comes down to great marketing. That's all from me. Thank you very much. I know lunch is waiting, so you don't have to ask questions if you don't have any, but if you do have any, you're welcome to ask them.
Any questions quickly? Come over now, 2 moments.
Thanks so much for that. Is there anything in your experience that was a real surprising hit? Because you're saying about, you know, kind of it's a tough call in terms of getting stuff out.
So we grade our slate, you know, and you're all trying to figure out what your top priorities are, and we do that too. And you know, actually we've got 4 grades. Grade 3, there was this title that we just basically put out, and it's been one of our best-selling titles of the year. It's a Western with father and son Sutherland, so Donald and Kiefer, and Demi Moore, who nobody's seen in a film for frickin' years. Now, I actually can't tell you why that has happened. And we do lots of review and learns, and you know, we're all trying to capture that, and we will do that. Now, what we did that I'm really, really pleased about is as soon as, because it was actually in DVD sales that we saw, it didn't even have a theatrical release, this film. It did in the US, but it was tiny. Nobody even knew that the film existed, really. It's called Forsaken, by the way. Apparently it's very good. Lots of people seem to very much like it. The physical sales really surprised us. And what we instantly did with that was we instantly got in touch with our digital team to say, it's going great guns on DVD. You need to be pushing platforms to promote it, which they did and turned around very, very quickly. And we are now reforecasting to 3 times our original forecast in both physical and digital for that film. That doesn't happen very often, but that was definitely a surprise. And I don't know why. And it might be because of, you know, The Revenant and The Hateful Eight, and maybe there's a little kind of Western zeitgeist thing that's happening. It may just be because it is quite compelling, I think, to have Donald and Kiefer Sutherland together in a film where they're playing a father and son. And a lot of our creative did tap into that. And Demi Moore looks lovely in kind of pioneer woman wear. But beyond that, honestly, you know, like I say, usually we are deciding what is worthy of a big screen release, and we didn't even consider that title for that. And probably we would have made more money. Anybody else?
That was a great presentation. Do you, I would imagine when you are creating communications about movies, then the temptation is you've already got the content there, which is kind of different to the majority of us, because you've actually got all the video already.
Yes.
So the easy way, presumably, is just say, I'm just going to cut this up and give people the flavour of what they're going to see if they go to cinema.
Easy, sure.
But it's not that easy, I'm sure. But I mean, when you showed the example of
Deadpool,
then that seemed to me to be they'd actually taken quite a brave decision, which is I'm not just going to use content from the movie, I'm going to create something that is different. So
absolutely, and has merit in its own right as a piece of content.
Yeah.
Really,
how do you judge that?
Well, now you see, we're all really, really pleased, but also a little bit pissed off that we didn't come up with that first, because actually, when you break it down, it seems like the most obvious thing to do. Now, the challenges are usually, by the time, particularly, you know, major talent have shot a film, by the time it's actually released, they haven't thought about that film for 1.5 years, typically. And so either, and I must ask my colleague at Fox how this actually worked, either they were so forward planning that they had their shit together and actually filmed it all while he was in production, which they would have had to, I mean, no one works that way. Like, that would be truly, truly impressive if that had actually happened. Or they spent enough money to get him back and he happened to be available, which I think is what actually happened. But those are really the only 2 ways that you can do that. Is, as I say, it seems now like the most obvious thing, which is actually, how are you going to cut the best possible ad for what you are selling. And the best possible ad for what you're selling actually probably isn't a cut down version of the trailer. It's probably an ad for the thing that you're selling that makes you feel some of the things that you feel when you're actually watching the film, which is, this is really clever, this is funny, this is subversive. They brought all of those brand values into the actual creative process, and that's why it's so genius. So I haven't done it, and I'm going to try, because I think it's genius. I don't think that really answers your question, but that's as close as I can get, I think.
That's a pretty good answer.